Marvel series and movies like Ms. Marvel, Spider-Man, No Way Home, WandaVision, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and Thor: Love and Thunder are just some examples of how MCU Phase 4 has tackled the idea of superheroes failing better than Infinity War. Despite the negative criticisms regarding the MCU Phase 4 slate lack of a unifying plot or story, these movies and series have not only established characters and worlds for future MCU phases, but have also pushed the Marvel Cinematic Universe towards a promising creative direction, one where the heroes actually fail. Though superheroes have never been perfect in the MCU, they've also never failed like they have during MCU Phase 4. Typically, comic book movies depict heroes as relatively infallible. If they fail, they turn it around by the third act and end up winning. The concept of failure runs contrary to the very idea of superheroes, who always seem to find a way to save the day. However, the MCU Phase 4 is tackling head-on the idea of what happens when heroes fail, when they're flawed and fallible, and when they screw up big. MCU Phase 4 giving heroes a taste of failure actually bodes well for MCU Phases 5 and 6, which are likely to further explore and untangle the consequences of failing in the big bad multiverse. In contrast to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Marvel Comics has already deeply tackled failure and loss over the last decades. With the MCU getting past Infinity War and its foundational world-building phase, MCU Phase 4 has finally started catching up to the non-traditional storytelling in the comic books. Superheroes rarely truly fail in movies and TV and didn't in Infinity War. The Infinity Saga is essentially about superheroes overcoming their weaknesses and failures in order to win against all odds. Through the Time Stone, Doctor Strange saw 14,605 possible outcomes to the Infinity War, with only one ending in Thanos' defeat, which is miraculously what happens in Avengers: Endgame. While Tony Stark's death was the cost of securing Earth's future, he will forever be remembered as a hero and loved by current and future generations, which is what Iron Man ever truly wanted. Even Black Widow's death was a form of self-sacrifice that, like Tony, immortalized Natasha Romanoff as a role model for all future Avengers. All of this is because MCU Phases 1, 2, and 3 were all about establishing traditional superheroes in mainstream blockbuster movies. Even as MCU Phase 3 adapted some of the darkest comic book story arcs, such as Civil War and the Infinity War, things ended mostly well for the surviving heroes. The MCU has always embraced the idea of imperfect heroes. None of the original Avengers actually started out as heroes or role models. Tony Stark was nothing more than a war profiteer, Bruce Banner was a danger to himself and others, Thor was an arrogant warmongering prince, and Hawkeye and Black Widow's past means that they've probably killed more people than the rest of the Avengers combined. Even Steve Rogers couldn't resist being too full of himself from time to time. Indeed, throughout the various MCU phases, audiences got to see these characters evolve into actual superheroes wholly dedicated to protecting innocent lives. The MCU has always been about change, growth, and gleaning lessons from failure, and this has become much more magnified throughout MCU Phase 4. MCU Phase 4 is tackling the theme of failure. What makes MCU Phase 4 different from previous phases is that it sees Marvel's main characters taking much bigger personal losses due to their own failure to stop a villainous threat. Perhaps the most jarring example of this is Aunt May's death in Spider-Man: No Way Home. Apart from being brilliantly foreshadowed by Aunt May finally uttering Uncle Ben's famous last words in the MCU, this moment sees Spider-Man losing the only family he has left in the world because he couldn't stop Norman Osborn, arguably the greatest villain introduced in MCU Phase 4. That said, nowhere in MCU Phase 4 is failure more apparent than through Scarlet Witch's story arc from WandaVision to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. By allowing herself to be corrupted by the Darkhold and succumbing to her own selfish desires to steal a family for herself, Scarlet Witch became the ultimate lesson in balancing great power with great responsibility. Wanda paid the ultimate price for failure, with Doctor Strange 2 ending in Scarlet Witch's death. Meanwhile, though the God of Mischief survives the Loki ending, his failure is essentially what leads to the untethered multiverse, which promises bigger problems down the line for the surviving Avengers. Moreover, things also didn't end well for Stephen Grant, nor Mark Spector after Moon Knight, which concluded with Khonshu retaining Moon Knight's third personality Jake Lockley as his willing avatar. Even Ms. Marvel, which had a much lighter tone compared to the rest of MCU Phase 4, ends with Kamala Khan failing to help Najma and the clandestines return home. Not only do the Jinn end up dead, Ms. Marvel could have also been trapped in the negative dimension during Ms. Marvel's post-credits scene, the consequences of using an ancient artifact she scarcely understood. This trend is even present in the deceptive ending of Hawkeye, which, like Ms. Marvel, introduced a potential MCU young Avenger in Kate Bishop. Clint may have gained a protege, but he ultimately failed at dissuading Kate from becoming an Avenger and keeping her out of harm's way, Clint's constant goal throughout the series. Currently, the only MCU Phase 4 entries with truly happy endings are Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings and Thor: Love and Thunder, and both still grappled with how godlike beings can still fail and lose their families. It makes the MCU feel more real. MCU Phase 4's overarching theme of superhero failure is a promising sign that the post-Infinity War MCU can potentially catch up to the much more complex storytelling in Marvel Comics. To be fair, the comic books are not just a source material for the MCU, they also have a head start of several decades over their cinematic counterparts, which translates to a multiverse that feels both fantastical and real at the same time. With the new MCU Phase 4 characters and storylines paving the way for superheroes to face the heaviest consequences of failing to act responsibly, the MCU seems on the way to establishing a similarly more relatable but still infinitely complex multiverse down the line. Key release dates: Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, 2022. Release date: 2022 11/11. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Release date: 2023 02/17. Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Release date: 2023 05/05. The Marvels: Captain Marvel 2, 2023. Release date: 2023 07/28. Captain America: New World Order, 2024. Release date: 2024 05/03. Marvel's Thunderbolts. Release date: 2024 07/26. Avengers: The Kang Dynasty, 2025. Release date: 2025 05/02. Avengers: Secret Wars, 2025. Release date: 2025 11/06.